Welcome to Nationalist News and Notes. This is Corncod One. Today I'm going to entitle my little video here, 2.5 Cheers for Kai Murros. This little video is not meant as a criticism of the political thought of Kai Murros, the prominent Finnish nationalist theoretician, but simply as an assessment of some of the main vectors of his thought. We certainly have a lot more in common than we do differences, and I consider him a comrade and would treat him as such if I ever had the pleasure of meeting him. I've always believed in a certain diversity of thought in Euro-nationalist circles anyway. While not an admirer of Mao, his famous dictum, "Let 1,000 flowers blossom," has always made a lot of sense to me, at least in this part of our struggle. Here in the U.S., a lot of nationalist commentators dismiss Murros as a national Bolshevik, or Nazbol, as the youngsters call it. And I think they're doing themselves an injustice by simply dismissing him as such and using that as an excuse to ignore his thought. I think he's certainly one of the most interesting nationalist thinkers of our time, and I think everyone should be familiar, at least a little bit, with his ideas. I think he gives moving speeches, and I think he's a stirring orator, even in the English language, which is not his native language. I do have a few reservations about the thought of Kai Murros. All that stuff about Odin and Wotan is a little over dramatic. Still, I can't say he lays his paganism on too thick. Thank God. He's a critic of Christianity as well as the other two Abrahamic religions. But once again, he has the good sense not to try to convert others to his faith as a precondition of political revolutionary activity. The main troubling thing to me in Murros is his lack of interest in the Jewish question. I have been convinced over the years that the JQ is extremely important in assessing the current perilous state of European man. Probably one of the greatest attributes of Murros' thought is his revolutionary optimism. He is absolutely convinced that nationalists will win someday. He believes in a kind of tipping point where Europeans will come to the rational conclusion that they are on the verge of dispossession and death. And at that point, they will begin to fight back. He gets this idea from Hegelian, I suppose possibly Marxist dialectics. Murros' optimism, which goes back perhaps 8 years ago or even further, predated the astonishing rise of nationalist ideas in the last few years. And so it makes him, I think in a lot of ways, somewhat prophetic. The views of the left and the center-right seem increasingly stale to me, and I think a lot of other people. Murros' optimism in the ability of nationalists to defeat their enemies, even when outnumbered, is a view I share. Those who see a white ethno-state as some kind of tiny redoubt in the hills, I think are much too pessimistic. Even outnumbered, a pan-European international movement can go as far as even conquer the world. I also find myself in agreement with Murros' anti-capitalist ideas. The Fortune 500 have always been supporting the left, going back many decades, but in recent years they have unmasked themselves in a very public way as running dogs of the neo-Marxist left. One is just as likely to see and hear social justice warrior rhetoric in the corporate boardrooms as in the universities. Along with his anti-capitalism, Kai Murros is an opponent of class snobbery both in and outside nationalism. Murros is of the opinion that for nationalists to succeed, they must form revolutionary parties with revolutionary discipline and command and control. Right now, various people are experimenting with different forms of nationalist ideas, and I think that's a good thing. But eventually, we must have movements with soldier-like discipline and organization. The political thought of Kai Murros is something which every nationalist should be familiar. Even though I may have a few quibbles with his ideas, I think he is generally quite on the mark. This is Corncod 1 of Nationalist News and Notes, signing off.